Hello, world history students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and we're going to start our notes on our Latin American unit. And to begin with, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ancient peoples of the Americas. And so we're going to take a look at section 5 of chapter 2, focusing on the civilizations in the Americas, primarily in the time before the first millennia. And so as we go along, we're going to kind of move a little bit ahead of time, but we're going to focus first of all on one of the more ancient groups of people. And so in number one, the term that archaeologists use for the ancient peoples that live in what is now Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize is what we would refer to as a Mesoamerican civilization. And a lot of this is because these people lived in the middle land that kind of joins North and South America. So if we were going to kind of put it on a map, if you take a look below here, we're talking primarily areas like Mexico into what would be like modern day Central America, into parts of South America. So as we focus on our first three groups here today, we're going to talk a little bit about Mexico and a little bit about an area of today modern day Peru. So the first group we're going to focus on are the Olmecs. And they are one of the earliest Mesoamerican civilizations. They date back to around 1500 BC to about 400 BC. And they're kind of known as the mother culture because they gave rise to later civilizations that literally grew up in the same region. If you take a look at the map in the middle here, this area that's kind of rusty colored or orange, if you want to kind of go with that, kind of on the southern part of the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, kind of south of Veracruz, if you're looking at the map. This is where the Olmecs really had their civilization. In comparison to other world civilizations, this is incredibly small. But if you take a look, areas in the Yucatan Peninsula, or if you go further to the west into what would be the Mexican Plateau, or near modern day Mexico City, you're going to find that the Olmec kind of had an influence on some of the civilizations that are going to form on either side of its ancient base. Okay, one thing that I do want to point out is the Olmec were kind of known for these gigantic heads. And as we go into this next item here, in the earliest Olmec towns, you're going to find probably a large pyramid, a courtyard, and 8 giant stone heads. And some of these stone heads have actually been excavated and are now on display in places like Mexico City. But they were kind of unique because of the size, okay, the massive size of it. But within these cities, you're going to find like a throne-like monument, lots of jade carvings. So if you look below in the bottom left-hand corner, jade is a type of stone or, jewel, if you want to call it that. These figurines were carved, and carved murals also showed like the Olmec jaguar god, which is actually what's depicted here in this image. Anyway, that depiction of that jaguar god probably indicates to us that the Olmec probably had some kind of religion, and thus felines or jaguars were very important within their worship. Okay, by the time we get into the AD 100s, people known as the Teotihuacanos dominated the Mexican plateau and established their complex civilization. The plateau area is actually what would be pretty much in like modern day Mexico City. It's actually between two mountain ranges, and this is kind of where the city of Mexico City kind of develops. But the Teotihuacanos, uh, they were known regionally for their trade of obsidian. And if you take a look at the bottom right-hand corner, these obsidian objects are kind of stellar in the fact that they are very, very black. They're very strong, but the material that they're made out of is actually lava that is actually in the glass form. This is kind of lava that Because of the cooling process, there were no crystals that developed, and thus you get this glass-like um, material. And what's really kind of cool is as you are working with it, and if you start breaking it, it actually breaks off into this really great sharp edge, which is ideal for making things like spear tips and knives and things like that. Matter of fact, some of the original, I guess you could say, early scalpels used for cutting on flesh were actually made out of obsidian. So it's really kind of a unique um, product, but it certainly had a lot of uses. As far as like the different civilizations here and some of the characteristics of these, we're going to talk about the Olmec, the Zapotec, and the Chavan. The Olmec and the Zapotec were peoples that were found in what would be modern day Mexico. The Chavan were found down in Peru. So when we talk about agriculture for the Olmec, they raised fields. They also had drainage canals allowed them to basically be able to use water in a way that was going to benefit them and not necessarily be destructive. Religion, they had a jaguar god. What was even weirder is that they did human sacrifices. Some of their architecture, they had pyramids. As far as their calendar and writing, they did use an astronomical calendar, meaning that it was a calendar based on the stars and the constellations. They also had a system of hieroglyphics for their writing, which probably would identify them as being a more sophisticated culture. When you talk about the Zapotecs, also found in what would be modern day Mexico, they practice slash and burn farming. Some of that is because of the region where they were located. They were kind of in the southern part of Mexico, where a little bit more of kind of a jungle rainforest type of climate. You're going to have to remove some of the vegetation so you can actually plant fields, and that's kind of what they were doing. They also had several gods when you talk about their religion, so they were very polytheistic. And like the Olmec, they also practiced human sacrifices. Architecture, they had cities that were kind of planned out with temples and plazas. And as far as their calendar and writing, they used the solar and a ritual calendar, meaning that the solar calendar probably was set up so that they could kind of keep track of like where the equinox was or the winter and summer solstice. Um, Not much different than some other groups that we've kind of explored, maybe in your elementary classes when you talk about um, the Celts and such. But needless to say, like the Olmec, they also use the system of hieroglyphics. The Chavan, who were from what is now modern day Peru, they grew crops like potatoes, peanuts, and yams. They also practiced a form of religion. They had gods that had human and also feline traits. So, in a way, when you talk about like the Olmec's jaguar god, this isn't something that's lost on the Chavan. They had their own feline traits within their deities. They also had in their architecture platform temples, and part of that is so that they could make their sacrifices there. They also used adobe and cut stones when you talk about the building materials. But unlike our Olmec and the Zapotec, they did not have a calendar system, nor did they have a written language. All right, thank you very much.